the United States Capitol. This is a big deal, and thank you all for being here today. And those joining online, watching on every social media platform, welcome to this service. My name is Keith Nahigian, and I'm honored to be here and hosting tonight's introduction of so many distinguished speakers that are coming to pay their tributes to the victim of the Armenian Genocide. There are a lot of events that take place in this building. You hear clamoring and laughter and people getting together, but this one's a little different. It's not the case in the room tonight. We are here to honor those who gave their lives to celebrate their memories. We are here to honor the refugees from Artsakh and survivors from Baku pogroms. And thank you for being here tonight. We are expecting a priest to bless the service, but he is stuck in the security lane. So as soon as he comes here, VIP prayer. Okay. I want to start by thanking the Armenian National Committee of America and the Armenian Assembly and the Congressional Armenian Caucus for hosting tonight. These organizations have supported by so many over the years to educate members of Congress and the new administrations as to what has happened in the past and what is still happening today. I'd like to recognize the leadership of both organizations. Welcome George Kanyan, the new chairman of the Armenian National Committee. Talene Yakupian and Oscar Tatosian of the Armenian Assembly. They've been working hard the last couple of days. Welcome. Thank you also to their executive directors on both organizations, Aram and Brian. Priest in the house. Okay, well, let's start with a prayer, if we may. I'd like to introduce Father Sarkis Bukian from the Armenian Church in Bethesda.
Yeah.
Sorry for being late. Almighty God, we thank you for the great works you have accomplished in this great and blessed country of the United States of America. O Lord, forgive our shortcomings as a nation. Purify our hearts to see and love the truth. Give wisdom to our leaders and steadfastness to our people. Keep us in peace, O Christ our God. Save us from our enemies, those visible and invisible, knowing and unknowing. We also ask you, Lord, to look with your mercy upon the Republic of Armenia and Artsakh, whose sovereign territory has been breached by those who would see the entire Armenian nation and its people erased from the face of the earth. At this momentous turning point in the continued survival of this tiny, landlocked nation, we pray for justice and your protection and guidance, and for your abundant grace, so that the Republic of Armenia and Artsakh will continue to stand side by side with the other free, democratic, and progressive nations of the world. We also pray for a just solution for the people of Artsakh, as well as for the return of the prisoners of war captured by Azerbaijan during the 44-day war of 2020 and have yet to be released. May God bless the United States of America, the Republic of Armenia and Artsakh, and all their people. Amen.
I was mentioning the Armenian Assembly and the National Organization of Armenia, ANCA. These organizations work to educate the rich history of the Armenian people, the horrors of the past and present, and the organizations of the electorate, and the elected leaders on the issues that impact the Christian people. Politicians and their staff might come and go, but these two organizations have the huge responsibility to educate every generation going forward. Some of you may be asking what brought a kid from Cleveland to the program tonight. For me, it all started with these two organizations. My time in Washington started with a flyer in a kitchen in my aunt's house in Ohio, publicizing a Washington, D.C. intern program. My older brother, my older sister, and I all took part in the Armenian Assembly intern program. We came here and learned about our past. That work in Washington eventually led to us working in Washington, me for 6 presidential campaigns, serving in the White House, and to this day, I help run a PR firm proudly named after my Armenian heritage. To this day, hundreds of Armenian kids have continued to come to D.C. to spread the word of the Armenian history. This mission will never be over because the threat against the Christian people will never end. My great-grandfather, Kandahar Nahigian, was a math professor, and he studied in the Euphrates College in Armenia. He was joined by so many intellectuals at the time. He was teaching at the University of Michigan, and he got called home to back to Armenia. When he returned, they were systematically killed because they were Armenian Christian males. Why the males? Because the goal was to eliminate the strength and intellect of the Armenian people so they could be ruled by others. The only reason I'm here today is because my grandfather was dressed like a little girl and survived. He came to America to be free from religious persecution. He went on to become the chief engineer at NASA and helped in the early development of the jet propulsion engine. He's the reason I'm here tonight, and I'm honored to be remembering his sacrifice. He never spoke a word about any of this growing up. It was these two organizations that helped educate us when we came to Washington to learn about our heritage. I know many people in this room tell us very similar stories of fleeing the genocide. That's why I'm honored to help this last couple of years when we had the 120,000 Reasons campaign coalition to shine a light on the ethnic cleansing in Artsakh over the past few years. We worked to target Congress, presidential candidates, and many of them spoke out. We had a lot of success. Candidates like RFK, Vivek, Harris, and now President Trump all made public statements in the middle of the presidential campaign. And many of the speakers tonight are true champions to the cause. Why are we here on April 2nd when the commemoration date is April 24th, the traditional date of the genocide remembrance? The reason is quite fitting. It's because the date this year falls on a congressional break for Easter, the celebration of the resurrection of Jesus and the start of Christianity. After the resurrection, Jesus gave the Great Commission telling the apostles, "Go teach all the nations about Christianity." Armenian was honored by the 2 apostles, St. Jude Thaddeus and St. Bartholomew. In 301 AD, Armenia became the first Christian nation. It was a great honor for the Armenians to be chosen by God to be the first and oldest Christian nation on earth. But with this came great danger. Armenians have been persecuted for their faith for centuries. So tonight, April 2nd, because of the Congressional Easter week, we commemorate the genocide of those Christian martyrs. We have so many members of Congress here today and celebrities. And well, let's start it off. I believe we're starting with with Congressman Pallone. Congressional timing. Sorry, Congressman. Yep, come on up. I'm going to introduce you.
Well, thank you. I know he called me senator, but I want you all to know that my senator, Andy Kim, is over here on the left. He's always been very supportive of the Armenian cause, and I'm glad to see him, as well as Herb Conway from New Jersey. Let me just say this. I'm going to speak on behalf of the Armenian Caucus. I don't know how many of our members of Congress are here tonight, because as you may know, the House adjourned abruptly yesterday, and so I suspect that many members that would have been here from the Armenian Caucus went home. But you'll hear from the others that are here. But I just want to say thank you, all of you. Thank you to the ANC. Thank you to the Armenian Assembly. Thank you to all of you for your continued support of our bipartisan, and I stress that, Armenian Caucus, because without your support, we would not have so many members of Congress, both Democrat and Republican, joining the Armenian Caucus, which is our main vehicle, if you will, to address Armenian issues here, both in the House as well as in the Senate. And right now, our main focus is on the Republic of Armenia. But I don't mean to take away from the genocide commemoration, which is the real reason we're here tonight, because all of us know that if you don't remember and commemorate genocide, it's repeated. And as our MC said, one of our concerns is the repeat of genocide, not only in Artsakh, which has essentially occurred, or at least ethnic cleansing has occurred, but also our fear that Azerbaijan and Turkey and Armenia's neighbors, who are not friends, ultimate goal is to just eliminate the Republic of Armenia itself. And I don't have to tell anybody here the real threat that exists in that respect. So a big part of what our caucus is doing is trying to convince, and I don't think it's that hard because they seem to be supportive, the new administration. I'm out every day criticizing Donald Trump, just so you know. Most of you probably already know. But so far, it does seem that this administration under Marco Rubio and Tulsi Gabbard are willing to continue with the policies that we had, that we were articulating in the caucus under this new administration. And what are those policies? Well, we would like to see a peace agreement signed between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Is that likely to happen? We don't know. We know that there was a peace agreement negotiated supposedly, but just a few weeks ago, when it was announced publicly. But the reality is that Aliyev and Azerbaijan quickly, I don't know if I would say reneged on it, but certainly added all kinds of conditions that were not part of the peace agreement that was negotiated, most of which I think are unacceptable, and many of which you would agree with me are unacceptable. And I'm not going to go through them all. But the problem is that we don't believe, or I should, again, I'm speaking on behalf of the caucus, I know that everybody agrees with me. We're very concerned that Azerbaijan has no intention of signing a peace agreement, that they just want to continue the war because they have the upper hand militarily, and probably, as some of you have said to me even today, that the sort of raison d'etre, if you will, for the Aliyev regime is to say that Armenia is bad and they have to stay in power in order to make sure that they fight Armenia. But nonetheless, we are working and trying to convince this administration, the Trump administration, that they should support the agreement, put pressure on Azerbaijan to sign the agreement as originally negotiated, but more than that, provide some kind of enforcement mechanism, if you will, so that it's real. And that's difficult. Our goal, obviously, is to, which has been partially achieved, is to have Armenia be closer to the U.S., closer to the EU, closer to the West, not only because it's a democracy and it's a market economy, but also militarily, join NATO, have us provide military weapons and armaments so that Armenia can defend itself in the event of another war that we hope doesn't occur, but we have to arm Armenia. We have to make them strong militarily as well as economically and in other ways. Now, none of this takes away from what was already articulated, and I think will be articulated tonight. We still believe that Artsakh should be its own Armenian republic, or join with Armenia, whatever the people of Artsakh, the Armenians, believe. We still believe people should have the right to return. We are very much in support of, and trying to put pressure through this administration also on saying that the political prisoners, including the leadership of Artsakh, have to be released. And all these things are part of our overall effort. And again, I'll go back to the genocide. I understand over the years, there are a lot of you in this audience that are very cynical. And I sometimes think that I'm very cynical as well. After 2,000, did I say 2? Maybe I should say 3 or 4,000 years of Armenia always being on its own, not always being a victim of great powers, always being told we're going to defend you, and then not being defended. There's always a lot of mistrust of other countries that supposedly are going to help. But we still are determined to have our country be a supporter of Armenia and have an Armenia that can thrive in every way. That is our goal. So thank you so much for all your support. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Congressman. Always been a big supporter. Next up is Senator Kim. New to the Senate, but not new to Armenian issues. While he was in the House, he was in the Senate of Senator met with Dr. David Valian, Foreign Minister of Artsakh, who is today illegally imprisoned in Azerbaijan. So please welcome.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andy Kim. I'm a new senator from New Jersey. Was glad to be able to follow Frank Pallone, who's been such a leader on these issues, and continue to work with him. We stand here today. I'm here today to stand with the Armenian community in New Jersey and around this country to commemorate, to recognize, to remember the genocide 110 years ago, to make sure. This is something that I've had a lot of exposure to, a lot of experience in terms of engaging on. I actually dedicated my entire academic work, my entire PhD dissertation to genocides and mass atrocities throughout history, and have met with many families afflicted of the genocide 110 years ago, and learning and understanding the need to be able to lift up and always preserve that memory, and to be able to make sure that we're channeling that going forward, to be able to stop the constant continued attacks that we see, the challenges and the mass atrocities around the world at this time. I did that work, and it was work that was so powerful when I was doing the studies that I ended up going into national security. I worked at the State Department and dedicated about a decade of my life working in the United States diplomacy to try to stop mass atrocities around the world. And here at the U.S. Congress and the Senate, continuing that work, and wanted to stand alongside you because I know that this is not just a memory for people here in this room. Not that your families, when you think through that, and also survivors of more recent atrocities, refugees here in this room, that you understand this not just as a memory of what has passed, but as a living a challenge that we face here today, where we continue to see people being persecuted, having that oppression, continuing to see atrocities that are befallen our world right now. So that is something that I stand before you to pay tribute and to recognize the past, but also to stand alongside you going forward, to make sure that we're doing everything that we can. Learning from, building upon these terrible, challenging memories, but also going forward to make sure that we have to be able to deliver for your kids and your grandkids a better, peaceful world that you and your families deserve. So again, just my honor to be able to stand alongside you, to be able to be here, to be with my colleagues from Congress, to make sure that we are always doing our part. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Senator. Our next speaker is Congresswoman Laura Friedman. She's been a dedicated advocate for the Armenian issues, tirelessly championing the recognition of the Armenian Genocide and the rights of Armenians in Artsakh to return home. She's worked closely with the Armenian community and now represents the congressional district with the largest number of Armenian constituents in the nation.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be able to be here with you all this evening. Yesterday, and I do represent the 30th Congressional District in Los Angeles, which, as many of you know, is home to the largest population of Armenians outside of Armenia. It's one of the reasons I chose to live in that area, because I treasure the richness and the diversity of the community that I live in Glendale. And when they adjourned the House yesterday and canceled all the votes for the week, my staff said to me, "Why don't you go home?" And I said, "How can I go home? Half my constituents are going to be here in Washington, D.C. All of my neighbors and my friends are coming here to bring to Congress the issue of what's happening right now in Artsakh and Armenia, and of course about the recognition of the genocide that is so important." I have, as you heard, spent my career in politics working alongside the Armenian community as the mayor of Glendale and a council member in Glendale, and then when I went into the California legislature as a board member of the California Legislative Armenian Caucus. I was very happy as a council member to be able to be one of the council members who voted to give city land to create the Armenian American Museum in Glendale, which we are so proud to see under construction right now. And as a member of the California Legislative Armenian Caucus, was able to author genocide resolutions, send many letters to Washington asking for genocide recognition and for more concern around Artsakh. And to me, most importantly, to be able to travel to Armenia and Artsakh, where again, I ran into more of my own constituents and neighbors and friends than I thought would be possible anywhere in the world. But that was the wonderful thing, is to see the connection between the Armenian diaspora and Artsakh and Armenia. When I was in Artsakh particularly, I was able to visit churches that are thousands of years old with Armenian lettering, to visit graveyards that have the ancestors of my friends and neighbors going back thousands of years. And so to now see photos of those very same cultural legacy sites that belong not just to the Armenian people, but to the entire world, to see those World Heritage sites destroyed by Azerbaijan is absolutely heartbreaking. Because we have to remember that this is being done not because they need to convert these into something else, but to erase the history of that region and to try to pretend as though Artsakh and Armenia are not the absolute heart and soul of the Armenian people. It's indisputable when you're in that region how deep those roots go. And so I don't just believe in the right to the right to return, but the right to self-determination, and that the people of Armenia of Artsakh have been forced out of their homeland and to have been turned into refugees is something that the world can't ignore. So when I worked in my community, thank you. So when I worked in my community over the years to further the Armenian cause and the message of what's happening to the Armenian people, it wasn't because it was what my community wanted. And it wasn't because it's something that would get me elected. It's because it was the right and the just thing to do, that everyone should be doing. Whether they're Armenian or not Armenian. So my grandfather lost the vast majority of his own family in another genocide later. A genocide whose basis was created by Adolf Hitler, pointing back to the Armenian genocide as his roadmap as to how to commit ethnic cleansing and genocide. So this is very personal to me as well. And I will commit to you to continue to fight alongside you now in this role and to try to ensure that as Armenia tries to negotiate a ceasefire with an aggressive neighbor that has absolutely no justification for committing the war that they committed and the ethnic cleansing that they committed, that I will do my best to ensure that when Armenia is at that table, that is the full force of the United States standing beside and behind Armenia to make sure that its interests and the people of Artsakh's issues are put first and that they get that justice that so long has been denied. Thank you so much for traveling to Washington, D.C. It has been an honor to represent you, and I look forward to fighting alongside you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think honorary IAN
Yes.
would be a good name. Well, we have had some great champions for many years. We have a new champion tonight to introduce, the freshman congressperson from New Jersey. I want to welcome Herb Conway.
Thank you, and as mentioned, I am new to the Congress. I'm not new to legislating and working with groups who struggle for recognition, struggle for their identities as individuals, as part of our great country. I served in the General Assembly in New Jersey for 26 years, most of that in leadership. And one of the things I say to new members coming in, follow the leader. And I am very fortunate to have leaders like Congressman Pallone and Senator Kim and others who can educate me about these issues. Now, I happen to have a long-standing friend for 30 years who happens to be Armenian. We will talk about these issues from time to time. And I have had members and volunteers in my campaign. And I have, through that process, I have made a promise. And a person of honor keeps their promises. I promised to join the Armenian Caucus, which, if it's not already done, will be done, because I understand how important it is, one, to keep your commitments, but to understand, as a son of a history teacher, how important it is to understand and learn from our history. We see all the time these retrograde and intolerant forces. One of the things they do is they otherize individuals in order to prop themselves up or to engage in some kind of aggression, is that they strike at the history of the people. They want to erase the history of the people. We're seeing this in many of the leaders, I'm sorry to say, on the other side of the aisle, who are dealing in this kind of behavior. But it's about erasing the individuality, the uniqueness, the culture of a people as they march to populist rhetoric in order to achieve other gains, often personal to them, by the way, to put other people down and to take them out of the history books. History is written by the victors, certainly, but I understand, as someone who studies history, when I'm making that drive back and forth to New Jersey, I often have some kind of a history podcast on, because I understand that by understanding histories, you can learn not to make the mistakes of the past. Now, there's not a child who comes through school who doesn't understand something about World War II and the tragedy of the millions who were lost there as a dictator, a vicious dictator, tried to exert his influence across the world. Now, we see this, we certainly have seen this example in the Ottoman Empire and the millions who were lost there, mostly people from Armenia, but certainly others, Christian peoples as well, and their effort, propped up by this idea of an internal enemy that had to be removed and destroyed so that I guess the emerging country of Turkey could come into being. Not understanding the value of cultures coming together as one people, and the richness of that and what that brings to society. The cultural history, the intellect, the contributions that can be made by people working together as a humankind, as people who understand the breast and the heart that beats behind the breasts of all of us. The better we understand everyone's humanity, the better we will be as a people and as a nation. And what I commit to you today, that I will insist and continue to insist that our great nation, that by dint of our past, leads the free peoples of the world, the great democracies of the world, to make sure they are defended, because most people, as we know, live under autocracy. And it is autocracies that attack other people. Democracies don't do this. Democracies don't engage in this kind of behavior. And the United States must It must exert its leadership, working with others to ensure that free peoples remain free, and that we always stand for what is true and what is right. And in my role here, I can say, without reservation, that is how I will govern. So you can count on me as an ally as we seek to ensure that human rights around the world, certainly in Armenia and in that region, but around the world, are given the dignity and respect and the support that it deserves. Thank you very much. I have to run to a town hall.
Yeah, it's not a ringer. Thank you, Congressman. I want to introduce Senator Adam Schiff from California. Senator just went to the floor for another day, so we'll see where it goes. Obviously, Senator Schiff has been a huge leader and is the senator from the largest population of Armenians in the United States. He's been a big supporter of the Armenian Genocide Resolution in 2019, and he continued to demand the safe, immediate return of the Armenian POWs. So, welcome, Senator.
Thank you and good evening. I want to tell you how much I appreciate all of you being here, and I know many of you have traveled from all over the country to do so. Let me begin with a story. When Leo Kalegian was 13 years old, the Ottoman Turks marched into his home in the village of Injirli near Yozgat. He was forced to watch as his sisters and parents were murdered in front of him in cold blood. Seconds before what would have been his tragic end, Leo was grabbed out of line and enslaved. Eventually, he escaped and settled in California's Central Valley. He worked in factories and lumber companies, joined and served in the U.S. Armed Forces, and ultimately learned the art of repairing shoes. He married, had 4 children, bought land, and farmed on the west side of Fresno. His descendants continued to call California home. They spread his story and shared their faith. Their spiritual faith, yes, but also their faith that their community and their culture could and would live on. That the community they were forced to leave behind could find a new home in America. That dream Leo lived for was still alive and is still alive, well, in California. That story, unique in its own right, is by no means a solitary one. There are thousands and thousands more. For over 2 decades, I've represented a district that is home to nearly 100,000 Armenians, the second largest community in the world outside of Yerevan. Now I get the opportunity to represent the entire state of California and more than half of the 450,000 Armenians in the diaspora in the United States. And I've had the great privilege to hear so many of their stories. Like the ambassador, I've sat with survivors. I've been welcomed into their homes. I've listened to their stories of how their parents and aunts and uncles were murdered, how their property and the lives of their families were lost and destroyed. I've watched them relive the pain, reopening their wounds to keep their family histories alive. While we are gathered this month to commemorate those atrocities, there was a time when Washington refused to recognize these methodical killings for what they were, a genocide, the first of the 20th century. Over my career in Congress, I worked alongside many of you in this room to convince my colleagues, presidents of both parties, and the American people of the importance of formally recognizing the Armenian Genocide. And in 2019, the House of Representatives passed my resolution officially recognizing the Armenian Genocide by an overwhelming and bipartisan margin. And in 2021, President Biden finally cast aside decades of shameful silence by our nation to become the first sitting U.S. president to officially recognize the Armenian Genocide. These historic achievements were only possible because of a resilient and empowered and enduring Armenian diaspora and decades of your hard work. It is a testament to the efforts of thousands of activists and organizations, communities, and faith leaders. It is a victory for human rights and for truth itself, and it is something that we achieved together. But we know all too well the work that remains to be done. We understand too keenly that the wounds are still open. They have not healed, and in some tragic ways, they have grown larger and begun anew. Turkey continues to engage in a long and dangerous campaign to deny the genocide and to silence anyone who speaks the truth. Indeed, Turkey's denial has become a genocide on top of a genocide, to compound upon the erasure of flesh and blood, an erasure of memory and of history. President Aliyev of Azerbaijan echoes the genocidal language and actions of a century ago, and with the support of Turkey. They attacked Artsakh in 2020. They blockaded Artsakh for nearly 10 months, starting in December 2022. And then in 2023, the Aliyev regime took control of Artsakh, an area they had systematically starved and ethnically cleansed of the indigenous Armenian population. They have not given up their ambition, nor their overt attempts to forcibly capture more Armenian lands. Azerbaijan continues to hold Armenian POWs from that conflict. Just 2 days ago, I prioritized their plight and that of other Armenians missing from the raid and the cleansing of Artsakh by submitting a provision to be included in this year's defense authorization bill to bring them home. Congress must remain focused on those being held and those still missing. And the President of the United States must use all the tools at his disposal to pressure Aliyev to release them. I am standing firm, and you have my word that I will always stand firm alongside the Armenian community in California and around the world. That I will share your stories and dreams, the hopes of a people and a place that, against all odds, continues to persevere. Despite the horrors the Armenian people have faced and continue to face, their faith has not been broken. Their determination has not abated, and they have not wavered. The Armenian people have overcome the harshest of trials, and yet they remain strong and unbowed around the world. There is some hope of an agreement between two countries on a peace deal, but this must bring actual peace and not merely pave the way for Azerbaijan to gain an upper hand and contemplate a new genocide. There is an old Armenian proverb: the water goes, the sand remains. The person dies, the memory remains. So as we pause to remember the innocent victims of the Armenian genocide, we also reflect on the resilience of those who survived, and we continue to fight for them. We reflect on the perseverance of their children and grandchildren who built lives in this country and all over the world, who speak the beautiful Armenian language and enrich every nation with Armenian culture and heritage. You honor the memory of your ancestors and serve as an inspiration for generations yet to come through your determination, your heart, and your hope. And I will always stand with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. What a great champion you've been over the years. There's a lot of members going in and out today. There's such a great turnout. I want to recognize two. Senator Booker was here earlier. He obviously has been speaking a lot lately, but it's great to have him here. And also Congressman Gabe Amo of Rhode Island was also here. So I just want to recognize them for their efforts. Now I want to introduce Congressman Jim McGovern of Massachusetts. Ranking member of the Rules Committee and co-chair of the Tom Latos Human Rights Commission He represents the oldest Armenian community in the United States. Matter of fact, his district is home of the oldest Armenian church in the country. He's also been a longtime advocate of the Armenian issues in Congress. Welcome, Congressman.
Well, when I was walking in here, somebody asked me what the meaning of the beads around my wrist are. These were actually given to me by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. They were given to me and blessed by him. He told me these were to help me deal with my negativity, my worries, and my fears. They're not working. I need beads for this hand and around my neck. I am so happy to be here with so many friends, familiar faces. As was mentioned, I come from Worcester, the oldest Armenian community in the country, the home of the first Armenian church. And I've been in Congress now for a long time. And over the years, I used to go to every commemoration of the genocide, and the first few pews of the church would be filled with survivors. And over the years, fewer and fewer and fewer, and now there are none. And I heard their stories, I listened to their stories, I wept with them as they recalled their ordeal, the extermination of their families. And we, like Senator Schiff has said, pledged that we would fight to enact a resolution commemorating the Armenian Genocide. It took too long and it was too hard. I mean, we live in the United States of America. We're supposed to, if anything, stand out loud and foursquare for human rights. It took far too long to acknowledge what some wanted the world to forget. It is so important that you are all here in Washington to remind members of Congress not only about the Armenian Genocide, but about Armenia and the challenges that Armenia still faces. And it is so important that you're here at this time to demand accountability from the White House, from the State Department, and from Congress to free the Armenians still being held prisoner in Azerbaijan. We all need to do more. It is important that you are here to denounce the destruction of Armenian cultural heritage by Azerbaijan and to demand a just and sustainable peace agreement, not one that is constantly violated by Azerbaijan's troops and government. We want a peace agreement that is real, that is not just a peace agreement on paper. And that is something that all of us here need to be reminded that we need to fight for. Again, I'm Irish and Polish, but I feel like I'm part Armenian because I've spent so much time with the Armenian community, celebrating their culture, and I love Armenian cuisine. I've been to 1,000 Armenian festivals. My friend George Engagement is here, who has taught me so much about the Armenian community. But I just want you to know, we have a lot to do. And this is a very interesting time in our country where we are being flooded with information about so many different things every hour of the day. It is easy to get distracted or to feel powerless. And sometimes we think our voice is too small to make a difference. The Dalai Lama said if you feel that way, if you feel your voice is too small to make a difference, try sleeping in a room with a mosquito. Well, we're all a bunch of mosquitoes here. We are going to make sure that this cause does not take a back seat, and you have my word that I will be wind at your back. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Congressman. That was very zen. I want to recognize Congressman Latimer just had to leave, but he wanted me to say he was really honored to be here, and hopefully he'll be able to celebrate on the 24th as he's in this district. I want to also recognize the ambassador to Armenia, who was the first ambassador to speak out truthfully about the Armenian Genocide, and he was fired to do so. So thank you for doing the right thing, and please, welcome. Our next speaker is Congressman Brad Sherman of California. He led the charge for the U.S. assistance package to Artsakh over 25 years ago. He actively pushing for the increased security assistance to Armenia to secure its border against the aggressive genocidal Azerbaijan. And he was a big supporter of 120,000 Reasons rally that we had in front of the Capitol a year ago. Congressman.
Hello, I'm Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. It is a pleasure to be with you once again. I also bring greetings from my friend and fellow Californian Jim Costa, who wanted so much to be here. I believe someone will be reading a statement from him later in the proceedings. A year and a half ago, Azerbaijan's military aggression led to the ethnic cleansing of well over 100,000 indigenous Armenians from an area where Armenians had lived for over 3,000 years. An area, and we should know, the Turks did not arrive in that area until many, many, many centuries after that. Today, Armenians remain displaced and in need of humanitarian assistance. Now, I know there's a big fight over USAID, and there are a few mistakes that were made under the Biden administration. But that is no reason to stop aid to the people who have been ethnically cleansed from Artsakh. We must demand the return of the prisoners of war. You cannot have a peace without the return of prisoners of war, and that includes the leadership of the Republic of Artsakh. Now, I've been part of the Armenian Caucus since I arrived here in Congress, along with Jim McGovern back in 1997. I want to thank the community for the honor now of serving as vice chair of the caucus under, of course, our co-chairs, Bill Arakis and, of course, Frank Pallone, who was here earlier. And I have spent 28 years on the Foreign Affairs Committee. That is the committee that has jurisdiction over arms exports. And I'm now on the subcommittee that deals with arms sales abroad. And let me say, when Erdogan says he wants F-16s, the answer is no. And when he says he wants F-35s, the answer is different. The answer is hell no. Yes, Aliyev displaced the people of Artsakh, but he didn't do it without Erdogan. A country that claims to be a loyal part of NATO and cooperates with Russia, buying their S-400 systems that will then, as Turkey would use our advanced aircraft and Russian defense systems, will then leak information to Russia as to how their air defense systems can defeat our aircraft. No Armenian, no Greek, and no American should want Erdogan to get anywhere near an F-16 or an F-35. Now, I've partnered with the Armenian National Committee and others in a powerful congressional briefing with Republic of Artsakh human rights defender Gerem Stepanyan and former state minister Artsakh Beglarian to shed light on the crimes committed by Azerbaijan. I met with individuals who were able to tell me their stories of Azerbaijan's horrific acts. It was heart-wrenching to hear the story of a woman who had Azerbaijani airstrikes hit her home, killing her beloved husband and sons, injuring a child, Another shared her story that will forever haunt me. In 2022, her sister, an Armenian soldier, was captured by Azeri forces. She and the rest of her family found out what happened by looking at Telegram, where Azeri soldiers had put up the footage of them torturing her sister and mutilating her body. This is what we have to deal with when we deal with Baku. And I cannot even describe some of the scenes that I saw on that video. Now, until Artsakh's Armenians are able to return to their homes in safety, the United States must provide aid to Armenia to deal with 100,000 and more refugees. That's why so many of us sent a letter to Secretary Rubio that aid to Armenia must be restored. And it is time, of course, to hold Azerbaijan accountable. You heard from my good friend Adam Schiff. He introduced in the Senate, and I introduced in the House, bill that was mostly his idea, the Artsakh Revenue Recovery Act, a bipartisan bill that says we should seize all the assets of Azerbaijan over which we have jurisdiction and transfer those assets to an Artsakh Revenue Recovery Fund to compensate the victims of Azerbaijan's ethnic cleansing. That this is a dark day, a dark year for the Armenian people. But I was here for nearly 20 years fighting to recognize the Armenian Genocide. And we had almost thought that it was impossible until 2019, when suddenly things broke. It passed by an overwhelming majority in the House. A year later in the Senate, years after that, the administration. The arc of justice is long. The arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice. And I look forward to working with you for justice. Just as then we recognize the Armenian Genocide, which was so important, because as others have pointed out, genocide denial is the last step of a genocide. First you expunge a people, then you expunge the memory of the expungement. It is also the first step in the next genocide. The events of 1915 to 1923 laid the foundation so that Hitler could convince his henchmen that they could get away with the Holocaust, and then it also laid the foundation so Aliyev could think that he could get away with the destruction of the Armenian people of Artsakh. Never again should America be party to genocide denial. So I look forward to working with you in the years to come. And I look forward to visiting Stepanakert when once again the people who live there can live there in peace and in freedom. Thank you very much. I'm very
What a lineup today. It's a real credit to the Assembly and all the work of ANCA to have so many members of Congress up to speed on all these critical issues. We have another high-powered speaker here today. We have Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts. He is among the decades of support for Senator offered the community. He recently led the COP29 delegation of Baku and consistently made the point to talk to the Artsakh prisoners of war in Azerbaijan. Harassed by the locals, Senator Markey did not falter, and he supported the 120,000 Armenians who were ethnically cleansed in Artsakh. Thank you for your support.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone here. And it's just my honor, once again, to be with you as the senator from Watertown, Massachusetts, to make sure that Armenian voices are heard, that we remember the 1.5 million Armenians who perished at the hands of the Ottoman Empire, the first genocide of the 20th century. And I fought alongside all of you for many, many years in order to have a formal recognition of that genocide. And after decades of advocacy, President Biden finally took that important step, recognizing that it was a genocide, recognizing that it was inflicted upon the Armenian people, and that the American people finally had to stand on the right side of history and against the Turkish perspective, the Ottoman perspective of what happened. And it's just absolutely critical that we did that. And last year, I stood before you and I condemned Azerbaijan's unprovoked assault on Nagorno-Karabakh, which resulted in the forced displacement of 150,000 Armenians from Artsakh, a continuation of the very genocide that we gather here today to remember. And today I reaffirm my unwavering support for Artsakh's right to self-determination and the safe return of its people to their homeland under international protection. Azerbaijan's aggression did not end with the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh's Armenians. Azerbaijani forces have committed documented war crimes, torture, arbitrary detentions, the killing of innocent civilians. These crimes demand accountability. And I support the imposition of global Magnitsky Act sanctions on Azerbaijani officials, and I'm sending a letter to Secretary of State Marco Rubio demanding him to impose sanctions on those responsible for these grave human rights abuses. And we must also continue pressing for the immediate release of the Armenian POWs and civilians who remain illegally detained by Azerbaijan. These individuals have endured sham trials, inhumane treatment, while Azerbaijan has denied them the basic protections afforded under international law. Adding insult to injury, Azerbaijan expelled the International Committee of the Red Cross last month, the only organization authorized to visit Armenian prisons, now expelled. The United States must use every diplomatic and economic tool at its disposal to secure the immediate release of these detainees. We cannot ignore Azerbaijan's ongoing occupation of Armenian sovereign territory, the buildup of Azeri forces along the border, continued threats, and coercive diplomacy pose a direct threat to Armenia's stability. And I strongly urge increasing U.S. security cooperation with Armenia to help protect against these threats and ensure the long-term security of Armenia and its people, as we honor the memory of those who lost their lives in the genocide. We reaffirm our commitment to justice, accountability, and the protection of Armenian lives, culture, and sovereignty. And I will continue to work alongside of you. In the same way that I went to Azerbaijan, I went to Baku in November with Congressman Frank Pallone to confront that, to say that what is happening is wrong, what is happening must end, that we need to have a resolution of these issues in a way which protects and guarantees Armenian sovereignty, which releases the prisoners, which allows for a right of return, which allows for there to be a resolution of these issues. And even while we were there, Congressman Pallone and I, we had to have bodyguards with us at all times, even in the hotel. Even in the hotel. The bodyguard insisted that we go up in the elevator together, that he go down to my hotel room, and that he goes into the hotel room every time alone to go under the bed, into the closets, into the bathroom, to make sure that it was safe for me in a hotel in Baku to be. And the same thing was true for Congressman Pallone. That is the level of fear which is injected into people who want to speak up on behalf of Armenia. But we went to deliver the message to the Azerbaijan leaders, to their government, that Armenia and its rights must be protected. And so I've traveled all around the world as a member of the Senate, and I never had anyone who had to go into the bedroom before me in the hotel, which is supposed to be where the Azerbaijan government is hosting us, okay? But I was glad to be there, because I was glad to deliver the message for you to the Azerbaijan. Let's keep fighting. Thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you, Senator. No room service, I'm guessing. So we've had, they say politicians all want to be celebrities, but we have a real celebrity here tonight. We have an American Armenian actor with Armenian heritage, which is even better. And he brought his supporting actor. Yeah. Right, with you tonight. Yes. Joe Manganiello was the actor, producer, and director and author. He gained prominence with his portrayal of werewolf in the big series True Blood on HBO. Our social media is going to take a kick right now. But the bigger news is that his paternal grandmother, Rose Tarakian, was an Armenian Genocide survivor. During the genocide, Rose's husband and 7 of her children were all killed during the genocide. We want to welcome Joe for some remarks to everyone on this conversation.
Hi, everyone. Yes, that's my great-grandmother. Her name was Turbiz Darakjan. When she came to and settled in Worcester, she married an Armenian man there named Harry Tatarian and was known as Rose Tatarian of Worcester. Well, I'm really overwhelmed by the amount of support. I'm overwhelmed by the energy here. I'm here because I'm descended from a survivor of the genocide. My great-grandmother, as you heard briefly, and if you don't know, she came from a town called Harper, which was in western Armenia. And as the story goes, that was passed down to me at a young age. The Turks came into her village. They had removed her husband prior. He, along with the other men, were taken off to work, to support the army, and were murdered so that the women and children were left alone. And Turks came into her house, and they shot her, and she didn't die. And she fell to the ground, and they murdered 8 of her children while she lay there on the ground. And they left the 9th child, the infant, to starve in the crib, which is how they did business in those days. And she didn't die. She got up off the ground, she took a piece of clothing from each one of the 8 children that had died, and she strapped that 9th child onto her back and somehow escaped past the death marches. They were rounding up the women and children and chaining them together and marching them off into the desert. Somehow she made it past that and made her way to the Euphrates River, where she strapped the infant on her back and swam the river to safety. When she made it to the other side with a bullet in her and the baby on her back, she realized that that 9th child, the infant, had drowned. So, when you think about a movie scene, and you think about an actor having to portray a scene like that with realism, and you think about that actually happening to someone. I went on to the show Finding Your Roots on PBS, and it took me 10 years to try to get on that show because genealogy just wasn't at a point scientifically where they could bridge some of those gaps and get over some of those brick walls that I was facing in trying to find out my family's past, my ancestry. But finally they accepted me. And I went on to the show, and I brought them this story as I had put together by interviewing all of my family members, everyone that knew my great-grandmother. I came to the show with all of this information. And I had no idea the kind of impact that just me going onto a nationally televised program and talking about the Armenian Genocide would do. I had no idea. I simply was telling the truth. I mean, this happened. I mean, I still find it hard to believe that there are deniers of the genocide. I mean, as Armenians, we all know where they went. We all know what happened. So I told this story on TV, and about a month later, I was at a Super Bowl party in California, and there was a line that formed, like I was the Godfather or something, and it was a line of Armenians, and they all had tears in their eyes, and they were coming up to thank me for talking about it out loud because their grandmother started talking or their parents started talking, and I realized that there were generations that just didn't talk about any of it. Because of that, I was invited to the Children of Armenia Fund benefit 2 years ago in New York. And I gave a speech there, and Garo Arman invited me to come and stay in his apartment in Yerevan to make my pilgrimage back to Armenia. And so I took him up on it. And my girlfriend Caitlin and my dog Bubbles, we all made our way to Armenia. And we had dinner with the Armenian president. I met the chairman of the diaspora, and we toured the countryside and all of the monasteries. And everywhere I went, I saw this symbol carved into the stone, which is the 8-pointed sun, which is thousands of years old, mind you. And that 8-pointed sun means eternity, which is so important to the Armenians now. And it showed me that no matter what happened to the Armenians and what will ever happen to the Armenians, because of the survivors like my great-grandmother that just lived through the atrocities so that they could then have a child, and that child could have a child, so that 110 years later, I feel like I answered a message in a bottle that was thrown out by her in 1915. Please help, please tell my story. And I really do believe she's somewhere looking at me here. I really believe that every time I talk about it, every time I bring light to it, she's listening. I look at that photo there of the Genocide Memorial in Yerevan, and I was allowed to plant a tree for her. And I was allowed to make the inscription that sits there underneath in English and in Armenian. And I was promised by the caretakers there that they would take care of that tree. That someday when I had children, I could bring them back and that tree would still be there. Which is why it's so important for us to get out there and advocate, because we're in danger. We're in danger of the culture being lost, and that as the turbulence rises in that area of the world, we have to get out there and protect that area. We have to protect that homeland. I felt like I finally got to bring her home, like she finally had somewhere to go back to. There's a word that my mother told me that she heard mentioned when she was a little girl. You see, my grandmother was born in a relocation camp in Constantinople in the wake of the war. You see, after the genocide was carried out, a lot of the Armenians were rounded up and put into camps. And at the time, the Turks, they worshipped German military might. There were a lot of German officers and soldiers that were invited down to the Ottoman Empire at the time. And my great-grandmother had to go work for one of those officers in his house while he was stationed there. She wound up pregnant by this German officer, who then left her in the camp and went home to Germany. And she was left to give birth to my grandmother, a half-German, half-Armenian baby in this camp, without a father. And when we were touring the monasteries in Armenia, there's a monastery of Sanahin, which is on top of this hill, which is one of the oldest monasteries there. And there was a rainstorm happening and a flood was happening, and we needed to get back to Yerevan, but I just for some reason wanted to see this monastery, and I just would not take no for an answer. And so up we drove to the top of this mountain. And we got out, the rain was pouring out sideways, and we got out of the van, and we went into this ancient stone structure, and as we're drying off, I turned a corner, and I saw this icon of the Virgin Mary holding a baby Jesus. And I've seen an icon like this in every single church I've ever been into my entire life, but this one struck me because it was in the exact same pose of one of the only photographs that I have of my great-grandmother holding my grandmother in Constantinople before she got on the boat to come to America. It was the exact same pose. And it just struck me that how important that story is, the mother and child without a father, and how many women who went through that war and went through those atrocities had children without fathers, or fathers from the opposing army. And this word that my mother said that my great-grandmother used to describe the baby, that she called the baby her Hreshtak, her angel. And that even though the baby was from this German officer under some sort of what I would guess to be a power dynamic, she believed that that baby was sent to her from God. And this is where the faith of the Armenian people come in, the spiritual strength of the Armenian people, that despite like hell on earth, they kept moving forward and kept surviving. For what? The answer is so that 110 years later, people like us, people like me, could be here and talk about it. So that baby, she believed, was from God to help her survive, to just live on. And that baby, my grandmother, died at age 40 of complications with autoimmune conditions, which a lot of people are now connecting to generational trauma. So even the echoes of what happened 110 years ago still reverberate throughout our generation. And I guess I'm being put here to say that no matter what happens, we have to move on. No matter what happens, we have to heal. No matter what happens, we have to accept. But when I say accept, we have to take action. We have to have advocacy. We have to speak up in order to do what we can before we rest at night. And so that's why I'm here. I'm here to tell her story, and I'm here to try to put an end to the generational trauma that has affected my family. And I'm here to, obviously, with the current situation, beg the world to do the right thing. We all know that the genocide was denied in 1915. The perpetrators were released. It was all over oil, money, military interests. Listen, I accept that's the way the world works. I get it. But it doesn't mean that it's right. And so we have to use our voices, and I beg all of you to do what I did, which is to get those stories from the people that knew the survivors and tell them. Like, we need to tell them. There are so many people out there that don't know that the genocide exists until we say it. So let everybody know. Make sure that they do know, and let's all heal together. So thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here. I'm very proud of my Armenian heritage.
Rose would be very proud of. We mentioned the two organizations, the ANCA and the Assembly. We wanted to have the co-chair of the Assembly say a few words. Pallone, Yakupian.
It's going to be hard to follow, Joe. I'll give it a shot. Thank you for the honor of being here today. As we gather to remember the 1.5 million Armenians who were murdered during the genocide, we do more than mourn the past. We confront the present. Today,
As I testified before the House Appropriations Subcommittee, I was humbled to be included among so many organizations doing such great work. Yet it was heartbreaking that we as Armenians, 110 years later, are still facing existential threats. I also had a full day on the Hill advocating with 80 passionate and dedicated college students. My heart was full of pride, but at the same time, full of pain as I was watching these young adults grapple and advocate about so many grave issues. 110 years later, why are we still calling for justice? Azerbaijan's unprovoked attack on Artsakh displaced 120,000 people. Imagine this. Every man, woman, and child were forced to leave their ancestral homeland. Hostages from Artsakh remain unlawfully detained, facing sham trials. And as we speak, the fragile region holds its breath, waiting to see whether the world, the international community, will uphold the principles of peace and human rights it so often proclaims. The Armenian people have endured genocide, exile, and erasure. But we are still here, and we are not asking for charity. We are demanding accountability, security, and peace. The United States has long stood as a beacon for human rights and self-determination. In this moment, we ask America not just to remember history, but to help shape its course, to stand with Armenians in our pursuit of justice, to secure the release of the hostages, and to ensure a lasting peace for a people who have suffered too long. That is how we honor the past, by refusing to be silent in the face of injustice today. Thank you very much.
I want to bring up ANCA new chairman, George Akanian.
Thank you. Joe, thanks. Yeah, I was fortunate to actually have a role in the research for that episode, those of you that know. And for Keith, if you want to know more about your family history, I can tell you the Nahigian family was one of the largest families in Husini, and you know, I'm well aware of them and can give you quite a bit of information about them if you're interested. But today, I'm here to talk about something else. So similar to a little bit of what Joe said, I want to say that I'm the descendant of genocide survivors as well. My grandmother, Margaret Garabedian Manganiello, in 1915 saw her father beheaded, killed, her mother and sisters sent on the death march and never heard from again, and herself enslaved for 6 years until her sole surviving sister rescued her. Her sister's grandson, my cousin Steve, is here tonight as well. And the two of us, as well as others, have taken many trips to those lands of our people, and have seen, not only walked in the steps of the story she told and the experiences she had, but have seen the destruction, the continued destruction of our cultural heritage there today. The crime did not end in 1915, it continues today. The continued persecution and prejudice against the Armenians that remain there, including my own relatives who I found that were taken during the genocide and separated from us for 100 years, and who I found 100 years later, my great-grandmother's sister and her family, and the persecution they continue to face today. And then in 2020, Ani Chaglassian, who's here, Sebu Hatsakordzian, whose family is here, and I were some of the first into Artsakh after the war. And I saw the same destruction. And I saw my grandmother's face and the face of the children that had experienced the terror and horror of that war. And today, displacement and persecution and prejudice and destruction again of our cultural heritage. These are not separate events. They are tied together. What we want, what we all want, what Armenians have always wanted, is to live in peace. But that peace has to be durable. It has to be a just peace. A peace that is founded on further enslavement of our people, with the expectation of all the crimes that will follow from that and the destruction of every evidence of our presence on the lands where our people formed, is not of peace that will last. It is not the foundation of a durable peace. As was said, you do not honor the past by forgetting about protecting our future. You have to protect the future. And never again cannot simply be words. As Armenian Americans, we demand action. Thank you.
Thank you. It'd be great to get more information. My grandfather never talked about it, and I think it's probably because he didn't want to do it, because we would say, then where is all this information that you're talking about? I can't find it anywhere, so there's no internet then. Unfortunately, Congressman Costa couldn't join us tonight, but he will be putting his remarks online when this airs. Before I bring up the father for a quick benediction, I just wanted to, all of you are advocates and supporters of this movement. One advantage of doing this on April 2nd is it gives you all 22 days to get your social media posts and all your messaging together. A lot of the videos and the high-powered speeches that were given tonight, you'll be able to like and post, and I think that's really great for advocacy, unlike if we were doing this on the actual day. So you all have a homework assignment after today, and I'd like to bring up the father for a brief benediction.
Անունհոր եւ Որդու եւ Ոգուն Սրբամեն, Բահավան ամենայնի Քրիստոս, աչքողովանի լիցի վերամեր, իդվե եւ իքշելի, ինստիլի դան, իքնալի ջանաբար, իննչել եւ իհարնել, զիմի երբեք սասանեսու, եւ ողորմյակո արարածոցդ, եւ մեզ բազմամեղացս, ամեն։